The Loneliness Project was initiated by co-principal investigators Dr. Erin Day and Dr. Caitlin Schwann. This study explores experiences of loneliness, COVID-19, and housing by engaging with 29 young women and gender-diverse youth who had transitioned out of homelessness and into housing. Our research team is made up of academic researchers, co-researchers with lived experience of homelessness, and 2 expert consultants. Today, the 3 co-researchers, including myself, Charlotte Smith, MA student in sociology, and peer researcher, are here to provide an overview of our findings so far. As co-researchers, it was our job to design and carry out data collection during the second phase of this work. We designed a series of 8 focus groups that we referred to as research workshops. We envisioned the workshops as both a form of data collection and a space for peers to meaningfully connect. For example, we hired a social worker who participants and co-researchers could access during and between meetings over the 8 weeks. We always ended workshops with a fun group activity, and each participant had the option to receive a care package at the end of the project. We did encounter several challenges, such as how to create a meaningful connection in an online format, how to present data without re-traumatizing participants, and how to intervene when one group member might share knowledge that is inadvertently harmful to another. In the near future, we plan to publish our reflections on this research process. Reflecting the data, we want to emphasize that loneliness is one of several complex phenomena that can persist, increase, and evolve for youth who transition into housing. We've organized participants' reports of loneliness into 3 major types: physical, emotional, and structural. Physical loneliness occurs when youth lack access to friends and/or family. For example, newcomer youth sometimes pointed to their geographical separation from their social networks, even as they acknowledge their immigration to Canada as an overall positive and in some cases life-saving event. Other youth pointed to the pandemic, family breakdown, death, or their transition into housing as the cause of their physical isolation. For some youth, access to technology or transportation might be enough to help reconnect. In other cases, reconnection might not be possible at all. Several participants emphasized the need for resources and spaces that might help them establish new and healthy social relationships. Emotional loneliness occurs when youth lack a sense of connection or belonging. For example, participants who spent time in emergency shelters sometimes explained that, although they were rarely physically alone, they did not feel meaningfully connected to those around them. Furthermore, when youth in shelters tried to form peer groups in these spaces, those groups were sometimes centered around substance use or other activities that they did not necessarily wish to engage in. Feeling unsafe, judged, or misunderstood were reported as factors contributing to emotional loneliness. For some youth, poor mental health hindered their capacity to feel connected. In relation to the pandemic, several participants described how opportunities for online communication did not make up for the loss of in-person interactions, while other youth saw the emergence of online formats for social and professional support as a positive factor. Finally, structural loneliness is where youth's structural environment creates barriers to essential supports and materials, or when youth are systematically excluded from opportunities such as employment and education. When young people are structurally excluded from human rights such as housing, or systemically subjected to injustices such as racism, one result can be loneliness. Employment and education were sometimes identified as factors that could reduce loneliness, yet many participants reported significant barriers to enrolling in school or finding work. Romantic relationships were often envisioned as the opposite of loneliness, yet such relationships were also identified as risks by some participants. For some youth, loneliness was a symptom of the self-isolation that they used to keep themselves and their children safe from domestic upheaval or abuse. Importantly, loneliness was identified as contributing to negative mental health outcomes, and sometimes shape youth's behavior in ways that were not beneficial to them. For example, some youth describe staying in harmful or unhealthy relationships or, in their words, latching on too quickly to people who abused their trust in their attempts to avoid loneliness. Overall, we learn that more needs to be done at individual and structural levels to address issues of loneliness for youth who exit homelessness.
Hello, I am Holly Peterson, and I'm one of the co-researchers with lived experience that worked on this project. At first, I want to focus on what we learned from participants during the research workshop on housing. In fact, this is one of the only workshops that we ran out of time before getting through half of the questions. Some participants reported on being told many despicable lies by landlords, such as children needing their own bedrooms when they have siblings. Other participants described unjust discrimination, such as being a newcomer. Youth shared so many negative experiences of finding housing and dealing with landlords that I had the idea of contacting Center of Equal Rights and Accommodations, also known as CERA, about organizing a tenant rights workshop for participants. CERA has agreed to create a custom presentation based on some of the data, including questions youth had and what we've collected so far. We will invite participants to a workshop led by CERA to learn more about housing as a human right, tenant laws, and more this November. Although knowing your rights does not protect you from the already rampant discriminatory practices that are normalized in finding housing, it is our hope that participants will be able to know how to and when to fight for their rights, and know how to educate and support their friends when their friends are going through housing issues. Fighting for your rights can wear a person thin. Legal processes can be a long time, and connecting with organizations like CERA, who will stand beside the people as they fight to keep their housing, is an important resource that we want to share with participants. For that, we are thankful to CERA for partnering with us in this knowledge mobilization and research output. It was glaringly evident in our research with women and gender diverse youth that housing does not mean safety. As I kept preparing for this presentation, all amped to add my voice to the already amplified cry for affordable housing, that housing is a human right, everything looped back to safety. Safety is a place where you go. Safety has walls and friendly faces, connections to your community, and hope for better things to come. Participants in the study echoed this truth throughout the research, speaking of wishing their shelter was safer, wishing the people they were surrounded by held the same values, wishing there was a place they could go to connect with others without fearing being hit on while venting about their problems. Homelessness and transitioning in and out of homelessness puts a person into a very easily victimized position. As a person, you are subject to landlords who may be discriminatory towards you, or rationalize not renting to you because you are homeless, or because you have a child. You are subject to predatory people in the shelter who may use you. You are at risk of dangerous friendships, peer pressure, violence, and countless other things brought to you by systemic issues, creating a systemic crisis. The fact is that safety ties into everything. Asking what safety means to you extends to the people surrounding you, where you sleep, and the community in where you're staying. When someone feels unsafe, they may experience loneliness, stress, and alienation from their communities. While the definition of feeling safe changes with every person, all participants brought up wanting to feel safe when creating meaningful relationships, and knowing that there was a safe place to go when they felt unsafe where they were. Suggestions came up that there should be more online groups that are weekly for people to talk to other people in their communities, and a safe place to go that wasn't a shelter that would be open all the time, with social workers and peers. Have a safe place to drop by after work and meet people in your community to create lasting friendships. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Shinue Built and I'm one of the co-researchers for this project, as well as I have lived experience. My focus for this presentation is on the data collected from the newcomer and refugee workshop. I found that at least 50% of the participants identified as single mothers. while the other 50% identified as young women or gender diverse youth. All of our participants had a negative or positive story in regard to accessing services while living in Canada. Many of these negative stories revolved around finding safe and affordable housing, accessing healthcare, access to education, and language barriers. Participants emphasized on the difference between being a refugee claimant, non-status or with precarious status, and a permanent resident. There was a difference in the treatment they received while accessing services based on their status. For example, one youth stated that they were not able to access healthcare until they went into the shelter system and was provided information on which clinics did not require OHIP documentation and any form of payment. And this was because this youth was non-status at the time. One of the stories that stood out was from one of the youth who said, "In my situation as a refugee, I had to wait 7 years before I got a hearing. And in that 7 years, there wasn't many services I could access. In that 7-year period, I could have achieved more if I had been given access to colleges and universities. They need to implement better rules to help us as refugees, rather than waiting for us to be permanent residents." During this workshop, majority of the youth shared similar experiences and concerns about the way they were treated as newcomers, and at times they felt out of place and alone. Besides being alone, a lot of them stated that they felt a lot of racism, which they never thought they would have experienced being in Canada, as they called Canada a first world country. And we found that with all of this that they said, they needed they needed more support. From all the data collected, we found the need to create a resource booklet that shares an encouraging newcomer story and gives tips on accessing services and supports and rights to newcomers to Canada.